I was hoping to get a drink to calm my nerves, but that's a total fail, so don't mind the shaking legs, and I won't be making any eye contacts. Uh, we're going to talk about Gone in 60 Minutes, practical approach to hacking an enterprise with YASUO. This talk is going to be about speed hacking your corporation when you are on tight schedule or on a red team engagement, and about a tool, YASUO, that we wrote to aid in this kind of stuff. I am Saurabh. I'm Director of Security Research at Security Compass, and my day-to-day job is to do pen testing. That's what I do, and nothing else matters.
So I'm Stephen Hall. I work with Saurabh at Security Compass as well. You can see me wearing my Santa hat throughout the year. Other than that, I won't go into much specifics.
Right. I mean, I don't look like a guy who would have O days, so like just to set the record straight, we don't have no O days. Won't be dropping any shells here. So the scenario is that you're on a red team engagement, or you actually broke into a corporation. And so, yeah, one of the requirements for a red team engagement is that you have to be kind of stealthy and quick if you want to do your job right. And another assumption is that you've bypassed physical security. How many of you have revolving doors? I mean, if the doors are not revolving, it's not secure.
What if they always revolve?
You can make them revolve. It's not the right way to do it. And you've bypassed NAC. So like we have seen some of the clients that they implement network access control. Talking about NAC is going to be out of scope of this talk, but from my own experience, the best thing to do if it's a big company is just look for unprotected NAC ports. And like if you see a router hanging from the roof, lying on the ground, that should give you access. So what next? Your goal obviously is to get the keys to the kingdom, get access to maximum data, maximum ponage, enterprise admin, domain admin, mainframe, whatever. And so how are you going to go about it? Because running a generic vulnerability scanner may not be the best idea because it just lights up all the network security devices like a Christmas tree. So. All right, so the problem is that we can't use network vulnerability scanners. We have to be stealthy and quick because the security is on our ass. Like we can't use Google Docs. When you're doing external security assessments, you can use Google Docs like Cite, Link, that will give you some information. Too bad you're on an internal network, you can't do that. A guy I used to work with, Rule of Timing from Pateva, the guy who wrote Meltigo, he always used to say that it's not about what and it's about where. And I think the gist of the message is that it's not 1980s anymore. No matter how much we moan, security devices are getting better. Like if you look at firewalls, IDS, IPS, they're getting smarter. There's a lot of awareness in the community, so you won't find network admins that configure these devices in a pathetic manner. Like you actually, so if you're dealing with someone who knows how to do his job, it becomes very difficult to get around those things. So like the trick is to find that one server, one application that can give you access. And unfortunately, once you do have access, it becomes very easy to pivot from system to system and escalate your privileges.
So some of the easy ways that you get that shell is Tomcat. Who doesn't love Tomcat? Who also doesn't love JBoss? Because they're both the same. You upload your either interpreter shell if you want to make that much noise, or lightweight JSP shell. There's also Hudson Jenkins, which is a build automation tool. So, and they were nice enough to give you an easy way to pop the box. The two highlighted links are just links you click and you can run Java Groovy, typically unauthenticated. So they were nice enough. You didn't even need to upload the shell. They're just like, here, take it. So the first shell, the first window on the top is the Hudson Jenkins. So that is where that is the script console that you would just drop your Java Groovy scripting in and go. Sorry, the bottom one is the Ludanium script shell for either JBoss or Tomcat. Saurabh is going to speak about some more horrible fails that might not be known.
Every time someone says Hudson Jenkins, I see Paul O'Grady chuckles. uh, and also, like, I strongly believe that, like, if you're a pen tester, you would have exploited Tomcat. I think it just installs itself on the network. like it's well known that you can pawn it to gain access to the server, and we still find it in tons of numbers. And I'm pretty sure even if it doesn't install itself on the network, it definitely reverts back to the default credentials once you configure it with the proper ones. Yeah, that's just me. So like these are some of the very popular applications. Like I said, if you're a pen tester, you probably would have exploited any of these applications. But how many of you have exploited AD Manager Plus? Thank God. Right. It's like everyone, yay. So I was doing a pen test, and actually I hadn't even started doing a pen test. I was in a kickoff meeting with the sales guys and the point of contact on the other side, and they were talking sales stuff, and I was already plugged onto the network in the conference room, so I started trawling through the network, and I was lucky enough to find AD Manager Plus. So it's a third-party product that allows you to integrate into Active Directory, and then I guess they say that they allow easy management of users and roles through this product. And if it's configured with default username and password, there you go. It's the fastest pwnage ever. And during a kickoff meeting, you become domain admin because you can just add yourself as a domain admin user. User this thing. Yeah, I didn't even know what to do for next 2 weeks. So. Thankfully, I had internet access. So. The other big fail I came across was a CyberOM. Fortunately or unfortunately, it's a security device, UTM, Unified Threat Management device. And again, I was doing an external pen test, and it was one of those pen tests when you get like 10 or 12 IPs from the client, and there's nothing running on 8 of them. So I didn't have anything to do. I was about to give up, but like I started looking at the web front end of CyberOM UTM. And so I came across 2 ODAs that I reported, never heard back from CyberOM, so I just published them. Like, that's what you do, right? You got to become famous sometime. So the first one was that this thing had an remote code execution. So like it again, when you install it, it's configured with default username and password. Doesn't prompt you to change it, and there's remote code execution there. But the second vulnerability is much more interesting. This thing also integrates with Active Directory, and there's a test functionality. So there's a test button, and you can click on it to see if it's connected to Active Directory or not. So like like how it's kind of a health check. Can anyone think what could go wrong here? You just right-click on the page, and the credentials are there on the client side due to some reason. No one knows, I think. So the other port that I found open conveniently was the VPN port. So due to the nature of the device, it's most likely be configured with a high-privileged domain user, like a network administrator and so on and so forth. So yeah, since the credentials are client-side, you can just grab the credentials off the page and then connect to the VPN port, domain admin again in next 2 hours or so. And again, you can go back to watching movies on Netflix. Right, so the point I'm trying to make is that Hudson Jenkins, Tomcat, these may be more popular applications that all of us exploit. So that got me curious, so we started looking at ExploitDB, and if you actually parse through ExploitDB, you'll find that there are over 12,000 unique entries that can allow you to compromise or pwn a server in the similar kind of manner. And that's where we started working on YASUO, so I'll let Steven talk about it now.
So, like he says, why did we write this? 12,000 entries on ExploitDB. I can barely remember what I had for breakfast, much less that much ways to get a box. So, we wrote this tool in Ruby. No, we didn't write it on our flight here. We didn't have a flight here. It was a long streetcar ride, so just as bad. What else? So, it is not vulnerable. It's not an application vulnerability scanner. It's a application that helps you identify vulnerable applications. So that's the big difference. It's not as noisy. It's not your web inspect. It's not burp. It's totally different beast altogether. We support about 100 applications, which we identify by a pretty bad way right now, which is the unique URL that applications generate for themselves. And all of the applications right now are apps that support Metasploit. So YASUO will give you the Metasploit link that you can just go use Metasploit. And if it is vulnerable to that, it lets you figure out it is there. Like I said. Why did we write it? 12,000 entries. That just speaks for itself.
Whatever recapping here.
Yeah. So, like I say, these 12,000 entries are for remote web apps that are not XSS and CSRF. These are all exploits that are remote code execution, SQL injection, local file inclusion, remote file inclusion, all that fun stuff that gets you the shell. In a world without automation, like, so easy a cat can do this now. So what we did, we were on a client site one day, and they're like, hey, scopes for about 5,000. We want you to do your due diligence with Nessus. So we did. Took about 24 hours. Everybody knew we were there. And they're like, all right, you've gone and done this now. Now we're just going to give you free reign to do whatever you want across, what, about 60,000 IPs? 65,000, so a /16. And they're like, try to be as quiet as you can. I'm like, okay. So we ran YASUO. It took about 2 hours. And we found 25 applications across their net, across the 65,000 hosts that we could pop and get admin. And we were done by the end of the day. So Nessus took 24 hours, and we took 8 to get domain admin from start to finish.
So Nessus took 24 hours for 5,000 IPs.
Yeah, so 24 hours was for 5,000, and the 2 hours was for 65,000. So, and currently that's on a single thread because we actually haven't quite figured out how to do multi-threading yet. So there are things out there. There's Nessus plugins, Nmap scripts, Nick2, RAR, but what they lack is that they don't help you identify vulnerabilities that you might be able to exploit. So they help you know that, hey, this is here. It might have these creds, but what YASUO does is it's like, this is here, it might have these creds, and if it's vulnerable, you can use this to exploit it.
Right, so, I mean, in my opinion, Nessus won't even pick up 20% of these applications. Nessus, in most cases, will tell you that, hey, there's this application on this IP, this port, and it's configured with default credentials. It only picks up very few applications and tells you that these applications are actually vulnerable to remote code execution. So, right, so these are some of the search options that we provide with YASUO. And -F takes an Nmap output file in XML format. So if you don't want YASUO to perform the port scan, you can do your own port scan and provide the file with the -F option. -R accepts an IP range or CIDR range, pretty much the same format that Nmap takes. The rest of the options are kind of standard Nmap options, no ping. If you're on a filtered network, then you can avoid pinging with -N. -P, you can provide all the port numbers. -D, it only scans for all the default ports, so on and so forth. -B is interesting because through -B, you can brute force the applications that YASUO finds. So in the end, YASUO will tell you that, hey, I found this application on this port, and this is vulnerable to remote code execution or RFI, LFI. But this application also implements HTTP basic or form-based authentication. So if you choose to, using -B option, you can either brute force form-based authentication or HTTP basic authentication or all of them. So if you do just -B all, it'll brute force everything. So I wanted to write a nice program chart for YASUO, like how the flow works and everything. And I was working on my laptop. I was trying to create a flow chart using those shitty PowerPoint boxes. And my wife walked past me and she's like, yeah, that looks like a crappy flowchart. And, and I told her, so why don't you make it? And so she came up with this Tetris style flowchart. I'm sorry if you can't read it, but I did not have the balls to remove it from my slide. Uh, we did agree to, I barely raised my voice and asked her to make another readable version, so I think this is more readable. uh, so like I said, if you want YASUO to perform port scanning, you can use -R option to provide IP range or CIDR range. It starts performing the port scan, it saves the output in XML format on the disk and starts parsing that file. If you don't want YASUO to perform the port scanning, you can do it on your own and then provide the output in XML format using the -F option. And so after that, starts parsing that file, only looks for the open web-based ports, so HTTP, HTTPS, HTTP alt, WebSM, so on and so forth. And then it creates a very preliminary URL, so IP address, :port. After that, it starts using the unique application signatures from default path.csv file. And right now, as Stephen mentioned, we support around 115 applications, and all of them have exploits and metasploits. So it then creates the full request and sends to the server, and and based on the response you get, it tells you if the application is there on, if the application exists on the server or not. If it does, and if you do choose to brute force, it performs the brute force. We provide a very minimalistic username and password file. If you want, you can provide your own file and then do heavy brute forcing of those applications. And in the end, it will give you a table which will tell you that this IP, this port, has this application installed. These are the default username and passwords or weak username and passwords. And when you download the code, you get the main Ruby script, yasuo.rb, the response 200.rb Ruby file, which mainly deals with like form-based brute force and stuff like that. Default path.csv is the core file. It contains all the default application signatures. Users.txt, pass.txt are the default username and password files. It released under GPL version 3. This is what the current default path.csv file looks like, and we are in process of changing it, adding a secondary signature. Right now, we've made it really simple. We have got first column has all the unique application signatures. The second column has the unique paths. So right now, we support only Metasploit applications, so it will have all the paths, exploit paths from Metasploit. So yeah, we plan to implement a secondary signature and also a string to match after you parse the page. Behind the scenes, it tries to detect false positives. So before it sends out any requests for enumerating applications, it sends out the bogus request for a file, something like this file will never exist.txt. And this file will never exist directory. And then, those servers that send 200, 401 for each and every garbage file you request for. So if you get 200 back for these files, it just discards that particular port and IP and then moves on to the next one. What's new is we have tried to, actually not tried, we have actually finally implemented randomization. So we were talking about being stealth, but initially what was happening was that it would create an initial URL, so IP address, port number, and then starts reading the default path.csv files. So if there are 200 applications in there, it will send 200 requests to that particular IP and port, which is not really being stealth. So now it randomizes all the IPs and ports, so it doesn't target one IP, one port at the same time. It just randomizes the stuff. More robust check to detect false positive. Initially, we were only checking for a file name. Now we also check for file and directory name. The output table was pretty shitty, but thanks to Stephen, we now have a pretty output table. Obviously, more application signatures. So I think we recently added application signatures for IP cameras. So that's the thing, like you can add your own signatures if you do some recon beforehand. Like if you look at the wiki page of that particular company, you find out what technology they're using, you can just wipe out all the application signatures from in there and just put your own signatures in there and then try to find those applications. So the code is generic. Code is modular now thanks to RAM. Yeah, me and Steven messed up the code really bad, so RAM fixed that. All right, demo time. For the purpose of this demo, I've already done an nmap scan, saved the output file.
Can you see? Yeah. Okay.
Better?
I can barely see that. I'm here.
Wait. All right, so this is what it looks like initially. Dash. So right now I'm not trying to brute force anything. And in the end, you get the table because it's blown up, so table is a bit broken. But you will see that the first column is the application path, and the second column is the exploit path. The third and fourth columns are the default or weak username and passwords, and they're not there because we did not brute force it. So it's a 4-column table. And now I'm just trying to brute force everything, be it HTTP form, basic or form-based authentication. Yeah.
So the green lines that you can't see are good things. It means it's found something, either an application or credentials. Also, like Saurabh said, the default file is pretty simple. So if you want to use it to find the wiki as well, you can do that. Something I do is I have different default files that I use for different purposes. So I have one that looks for wikis, chef, puppet, stuff like that. And then I have one that either will look for just JBoss, Tomcat, because I've noticed sometimes that Nessus will find like the JMX invoker, but it won't check for default creds on the invoker. So if the invoker exists, but has like admin, Nessus won't report it. So it gives you that kind of flexibility to go through things a bit quicker.
Right, so like it passed applications, and then as it passes the application, because we chose to brute force, it starts brute forcing those particular applications. Again, we got a table now, application, exploit path, the second column, and then we got Tomcat. Tomcat, of course, it's got to be there, because we all know it reverts back to the default credentials. And then there are like 4 more applications on different IPs, and then the exploit path from Metasploit. So we don't support exploitation at this point of time, and we probably won't because there are thousands of exploits and exploit DB, and I don't necessarily trust all of them. Rightly so. All right, some of the challenges that we had that parsing, like initially when I started writing this thing, we thought that it's going to be super easy, but it's not easy to get application unique signatures. You have to install applications and get the application paths. We do dynamic extraction of login forms, username, and password fields when brute forcing HTTP basic authentication. And so if your page is in French, it's going to bum out. It's not going to work. So we try to do all the pen testing work in North America and try to avoid going to the UK or stuff. Future development. We plan to implement smarter version detection, support for more vulnerable applications, and that's actually, I'll come back to that. Support a secondary signature, add multi-threading. I'm not sure if we will be able to support vFeed. It's a vulnerability aggregator. It's pretty awesome. And of course, we are working on changing the format of defaultpath.csv file so that it's not 1980s style. We can definitely use signatures. If you happen to come across applications, drop us a line, a tweet, like post it on GitHub, contribute to defaultpath.csv on GitHub, send a pigeon. It doesn't really matter. As soon as we have signatures, it becomes more popular with each and every signature you put in. I suppose we don't have time for questions, so I'll be smoking outside, and you can catch me. Steven will be here with Santa hat, easy to spot. You can download the source code from here, and you can connect with us on Twitter or send us an email.
All abuse email goes to Saurabh.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.